I posed the question before the break about Jack Grealish and Harry Kane both now being linked heavily with Manchester City and moving there ahead of this new season. And the question is, if they do both move there, what is the minimum for success for Manchester City? So, Dean, here's the question for you. What if they do get both of those? First of all, is it job done in the Premier League? Should we all just pack up and go home? Is there any point in starting it if they get those two players?
No, because nothing's ever granted.
Okay.
You know, we've seen it before with, you know, the likes of the Galacticos and bringing in and PSG. You think of the talent that they've got, and they still lost the. You've still got to put the players together, and it's got to gel and it's got to work. Obviously, you've got a better chance when you've got, if you were to get the likes of Grealish and Kane. I think more so Kane than Grealish. I think that with Aguero going, that centre forward, I think is so important in some of the big games and the tough games where, you know, teams are going to sit back against Manchester City, deny them space. It's going to need that player that's just got that killer instinct that can put the one or two chances away that you maybe create. But I think you can never underestimate the Premier League and how hard that is to win for any team. So the Premier League has to be an absolute priority to retain that again. But it's Champions League, isn't it? That's what Pep Guardiola wants. It's what Manchester City want. It's what the owners want. I think if you asked a lot of the fans, it would be the Premier League for them.
Yeah.
But I think it's the Champions League. I think if you're bringing in one or two of them players, then the next step has to be the Champions League.
We know about their squad depth, of course, Manchester City. But if, for example, they went into the season and they focus purely on the Champions League, which I know is never going to happen because they know their bread and butter is the Premier League. But could you forgive them not winning any domestic cups and titles if they end up winning just the Champions League? Is that still success?
That's massive success. Of course it is. To be European champions, I think, would be a huge success for Manchester City and the club and the history of the club. And I think maybe the recognition that I think they deserve now, but what would give them across Europe by winning the Champions League, I think could be massive for the football club. And I think that's why it's been so frustrating for them and Pep Guardiola not to have just made it over the line, especially the final against Chelsea. But that's the really tough thing about being an unbelievable team with an unbelievable squad. That's the difficult thing about being a manager, isn't it? It's making them decisions week in, week out as to how I rotate, how I rest, who's best for that game, who's best for the next game. You got tough games, but you know, on the bounce, and that's going to be the tough thing. You bring in Kane, you bring in Grealish. They're not going to play every game, which sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But they're not. That's what Pep does. He's very difficult to pick and judge who he's going to pick game on game. But to bring in them two players, I think it would send just a huge message to everyone else that Manchester United, Liverpool, Chelsea would really feel like they've, at the moment, without adding that centre forward or a Grealish, would feel like they've got a chance to be right there with them.
Well, William has been in touch. Thank you, tweet already, William. He says, if City buy Kane and Grealish, then City should win everything. A team spending $250 million on two players should not be allowed because that will kill the Premier League. The Premier League, he says, will just become a one-team league. And Mike in Swansea, sort of agreeing with what you were saying, and when I posed that question of do they have to win everything if they bring these two players in, he was saying with Grealish and Kane, they should be shooting for the treble at least. But one thing you can do is you can buy players, but you can't buy luck, which is kind of what you were alluding to there, that nothing is a given, really, despite who you bring in.
Especially knockout competitions. Especially, I think the true sort of test of longevity and quality has to be in the league, has to be domestically over 36, 38 games. That, I think, shows that Manchester City have been unbelievable. Pep Guardiola has been unbelievable to have the record that he's had since he's come in. The Champions League, as Sir Alex Ferguson showed throughout his incredible years, is very difficult to win. And you've got to have a bit of luck as well along the way.
You sort of alluded to it. You think perhaps Kane is more important than Grealish right now in terms of who they should be bringing in because, as you pointed out, there's no Sergio Aguero anymore. And for a lot of last season, they were playing with a false number 9. So they can adapt. We know that, Manchester City. And they've been pretty successful, albeit that they lost that Champions League final, the one they really wanted. Why do they need Grealish then?
Because he's just a quality player. Because he's the type of player, especially against teams that sit back, which most teams do against Manchester City and make it really, really difficult. He's the type of player that's got not just got that awareness that sees that in front of them, they can see behind them. They've got that vision of, if you just look even just the goal against Germany that I think Kane scored. It was basically Jack Grealish getting it on the left, and he can see the fullback. There's not many players that can see what's in front of them and also see that run that's going behind them. Having that intelligence to look as if you're going to play there, draw 2 defenders in and then just reverse that pass. You know, there's not many players that do have that all-around awareness. That's why they're special players, because they're able to see things and judge things that other players just can't. And I think against teams that would sit deep, he's that perfect type of player that draws 2 or 3 players in and then has started in the last 2 seasons to make the right decisions more often, to create space for others, to pass.
And do you see him playing on the left
of
for City? Is that where you would see him?
I do. I think when I've seen him, he's been the best off the left. Drifting in, having that fullback overlapping that's going to take away either a fullback or the retreating winger. He's clever enough to then link with the centre forward or the number 10. He's actually quick enough to get in behind himself as well, which I think it doesn't look as natural coming from that number 10 position for him to get beyond the centre forward, which I think is important in that role. But he's just a wonderful, wonderful player. But for me, Kane is the most important for Manchester City, if that's what or a centre forward. And being a centre forward at Manchester City is not easy. I think everyone probably thinks, wow, it must be so easy to play as a centre forward for Manchester City. It's not. It's really not.
But why?
Because I'm so impressed with Jesus, to be honest, because he's such a young player. I think it takes more of an experienced player to play centre forward for Manchester City, because the patience you have to not be maybe involved as much as you want to be, to have to just wait and wait as the team builds up and switches, and then it looks like it doesn't come in, and you've got to be patient, and the amount of runs you have to make before maybe that one chance comes, and then you've got to have the composure after all of that, because also Pep Guardiola wants you to work incredibly hard out of possession, to have the composure then when you get them chances that come along. That's really, really difficult. It sounds easy, and you think, well, they have lots of the ball. Well, yeah, they do have lots of the ball, but I keep watching Aguero when he plays and Jesus when he plays. You watch, they're hardly involved. They do lots of runs without even getting close to the ball, and that's frustrating as a forward. Kane's even talked about it himself in terms of that's why he drops deeper, because he feels like a lot of the game drifts by without him being involved. Well, if you're to go to Manchester City, that'll be even worse, because teams sit so deep and deny you space. So what's Kane going to do? Would he then drift into where De Bruyne is going to be, or do you have that discipline to be able to be patient enough to wait for that 1 or 2 opportunities that come along that De Bruyne can deliver in just a moments of brilliance? That's hard to do than being a centre forward that's constantly involved in the game, constantly being involved in counter-attacks. Very, very different.
Well, that's the question that we're asking about the success then for Manchester City. If they do get Harry Kane and also Jack Grealish, what would you expect as the minimum for success for Pep Guardiola's side? And also the question is, it's being alluded that, both of them are coming into Manchester City. But if it was an either-or situation, who would you pick? Would it be Harry Kane or would it be Jack Grealish?